Some of the best players in history relied on simple yet powerful principles, and here are the 10 rules of positional play from Bobby Fischer that he followed again and again to keep playing simple but very dominant chess. Fischer was playing white against Gligoric, who was one of the top players in the world for many years, and initially we got the Rue Lopez opening that grandmasters love playing so much, but anyway, so far there's nothing special, both sides develop their pieces. Now this pawn is hanging, Fischer plays rook to e1 to protect it. So far it's all theory. b5, kicking the bishop back, bishop b3, black goes d6, potentially preparing development of the bishop, and now pawn to c3, and that is perhaps the first move that I want to highlight, because there is also a less known idea that if you put your pawn 2 squares apart from the knight, then it limits the knight greatly. Now the black knight cannot comfortably jump any forward, and therefore it basically becomes hard for black to play any active moves with it. Black castles and now pawn to h3, another prophylactic move by Fischer, this time preventing the black bishop from coming out right here and pinning this knight on f3. Pawn to h6. If you don't know what to do, just copy moves of Fischer. Here's the rule by Gligoric. I mean, again, in fact, it's all theory, and the idea by black here is that when they go rook to e8, now they're not fearing knight to g5. That could potentially create problems for that pawn on f7. That is the reason for the move pawn to h6. Now from e8, this rook hopes to put pressure onto the white center, sooner or later. Which brings us to the first rule of positional chess: control the center, control the game. We're talking about these 4 central squares, and as you can see, they both are trying super hard to put pressure onto these squares and to bring their pieces closer to this area. Because when your pieces are centralized, they are the strongest, and at the same time they suppress your opponent. And we'll see down the line how brilliantly Fischer used that for his advantage. Anyways, for now, knight to f1, white continues rerouting the knight to g3 and also opening up this diagonal for his bishop, bishop b7. Now, by the way, another interesting question: should black take here on d4 or not? What do you think? Now, for the OGs, you know the rule: to take is a mistake, and that is true. Usually, if you make an exchange without any clear reason, just for the sake of an exchange itself, you only help your opponent. And in this case, now white is fully controlling the center, right? Black lost all the presence there, which gives white a lot of space advantage and also way more attacking opportunities, because anytime in the future, whenever white wants to, he can start pushing these pawns forward and press the opponent's knights. By the way, there is also a little tactical justification if black captures the pawn right here, which might seem like a blunder, but of course not. Fischer would play bishop to d5 and would grab one of these 2 knights. Now, black didn't play this, again, to take as a mistake. Instead, he played bishop b7, completing development. And now, by the way, same question. Do you think white should take there on e5 or not? I mean, now you already know take is a mistake, right? It's the same stuff. Like for beginners, they really love simplifying matters to be sure they don't blunder something. But really think about this. Right now, these black pieces are kind of stuck because of this pawn, right? It's very hard to move them forward. But if you trade voluntarily, now things are much brighter for black, right? They gain much more activity and you gain nothing. As we're saying, if you trade, be sure you're paid. Now Fischer goes knight to g3, which helps solidify in the center, and maybe in the future the knight hopes to go forward and take part in attack of the black king. Black goes knight to a5, attacking this bishop on b3. Do you think white should allow this exchange or not? What do you think? There's a fun fact that actually Fischer had his own system of evaluating the value of chess pieces. Now, the common wisdom tells us that a bishop and a knight are equally strong and they're both valued at 3 points. So roughly, they all are equal to 3 pawns. But Fischer said that bishop is actually 3.25. It's kind of funny, such a computer evaluation before, chess computers were really a thing. He was really the stock Fischer of the time. Anyways, he said, Fischer, that bishop is 325, knight is only 3, bishop is more valuable, did not allow that exchange, and he retreats the bishop back to c2 so that black cannot take it. Now, black knows that a knight on the rim is dim, and he's trying to bring the knight closer to the action. But there is a lesser known rule, which I think is actually pretty cool, because Fischer here played pawn to b3, kicking this knight back, and the rule states that knights hate going backwards, just like in real life. A horse is usually terrible at walking backwards, and in real life it is, in chess it's actually the same thing, because think about this. Knight is the only short-range piece. It really needs to stand close to the position in order to have influence, in order to attack. And it is not true for all the other pieces, such as rooks, or bishops, or queen. They all can attack from a long distance, but a knight can't. It has to be right there. And therefore, if you kick the opponent's knight back, it totally becomes useless, right? And Fischer here uses his pawns really, really well. We also talked about the idea that if you keep your pawn 2 squares apart from the knight, then it greatly limits its movement. And now together with this pawn on d5, the knight on b6 becomes completely useless. It can't really come forward at all. And now to continue on to this strategy, Fischer goes pawn to a4. He wants to kick this knight even further back. Black plays pawn to c5, trying to somehow attack the white center. Probably a mistake because he kind of underestimates the value of that idea, pawn to a5, kicking knights back. But initially, Fischer uses another idea, pawn to d5. And the idea is that you can barricade your opponent's bishops with pawn chains. And the fun fact is you can use either your own pawn chain, such as in this case, and now the bishop on b7 is completely awkward, it cannot come forward at all, or it can be your opponent's own pawns, right? Such as these central pawns, this time completely limit this bishop from f8. It also cannot really come forward, it's totally restricted by his own pawn chain. All right, cool. Now, pawn to c4, Black is desperately trying to provide some active squares for his knight. Should we take here? You know that to take is a mistake, and we also know that we should not let our opponent's knight to come forward, because there they are really dangerous. They can cause a lot of trouble, and definitely we do not want this. Now, Fischer comes forward with pawn to b4. By the way, quick question. Can Black capture en passant or no? What do you think? Just a little test. And the answer is no, because the en passant capture is only possible if the pawn walks 2 squares from its original position, right? So if Fischer played b2 to b4, then en passant would be possible, right, like that. But now, since the pawn was standing here and only played b4 1 square forward, this move is not an option. Now, Black realizes that this bishop on b7 is totally paralyzed by the white pawn chain, and Black tries to rerotate to some better square. But now Fischer plays bishop e3. I'm not totally sure why he didn't play pawn to a5. Seems a very natural move to me, frankly, kicking this knight back, but that's why I'm not Fischer. I don't know. Anyways, bishop e3 totally makes sense just as well, developing a bishop. And then on the next turn, he played a5, that same idea. Now the knight is pushed all the way back, and now white gains a lot of space advantage. And that's another classical concept. Again, something which I believe people nowadays still underestimate. Because if you look at games of Carlsen, very often he gains advantage exactly by gaining that space advantage that his opponents often underestimate until it's too late. Because think about this, it's like having 7 people in a 1-bedroom apartment. It's really uncomfortable, and they start, standing in the way of each other. And it's pretty hard, right? Now, all these pieces are very hard. Like, what do you do with this knight from c8? If you move here, it blocks all the other pieces, right? If you move the bishop, it can't get out because of the knight, right? All these pieces are standing in the way of each other. And Fischer goes queen to d2. By the way, that also reminds me another game of Karpov, which was played 4 years later. And it became like a famous game of Karpov. But I wonder if he learned these strategies from Fischer. This is Karpov's immortal positional game, and you can't not to notice similarities, right? It's pretty much a similar thing. I mean, these pawns on the a-file were traded, but other than that, looks very close to how Fischer played it. Back to the Fischer Gligoric game, Black played knight to h7. Black is having a limited position, he's restricted in space, but his position is extremely solid, and it's hard for white to do much. White goes king to h2. I mean, basically, in order to begin your attack, you need to open up the position first. You need to make a pawn move. And here, if you think about this, the queen side is locked, the center is locked, even though the central control provides white a lot of space advantage. Makes it very hard for Black to move around. All his pieces are limited. But nevertheless, in order to begin the real attack, white needs to push a pawn somehow, right? Somewhere on the king side. So it's either move this knight away and then play pawn to f4, or maybe to go knight to f5 and g4 and launch the attack that way. And Fischer sees that in both cases, whether it's f4 or g4, his king is becoming a little bit vulnerable. Therefore, he decided to play this king to h2 move first and later decide what to do. Bishop e7. Black is hoping to trade off some pieces, which is again a classical advice for cramped positions. When you have too many pieces standing in the way of each other, it's really great to trade off some of them. Fischer played knight to f5 to stop this, but just to illustrate the idea, let's say Fischer played any other move which is not as good, allowing Black to start trading pieces. And you can immediately see that if white allows that, Black's position becomes much freer right away. If we just trade off some pieces, now black's position is just absolutely fine, right? There's no issues anymore. The knight can move around freely, and his position is just great. That's how great it is to trade off pieces when you have limited space. In the real game, Fischer shutted it down by going knight to f5 and taking aim at this bishop. And this also brings us to the next rule. Bring your knights to outposts, advanced, protected positions. It's kind of the flip side of the same rule we talked about earlier. Just like knights hate going backward, they're really passive there. And the flip side of the same coin is that for your knight, definitely want to bring them to your opponent's half of the board and fix them there. Then a knight as a short-range piece becomes super active and puts a lot of pressure onto your opponent. Now, black goes bishop g5, trying to trade off at least something. Now, quick question. Would you take with a knight or with a bishop? What do you think? And we already know that Fischer valued bishops over knights. Bishop is 325, a knight is only 3, therefore he definitely wanted to trade off his knight. Pawn recaptures, now pawn to g4. He gains even more space advantage, this time on the king side. And now if black ever wants to get rid of this knight by trading off, now white has options. He can recapture with either this pawn or perhaps even better with this one, opening up the g-file for his rook. And by the way, now the move king to h2, which he played earlier, would make a ton of sense. Alright, in the game, however, black played pawn to g6, which is, of course, a much easier way to kick out this knight. The knight retreats, and now pawn to f6. And Gligoric is playing like super solid chess. He's still having less space, but he almost completely barricaded the position. It kind of reminds me how humans are trying to play against computers, because computers are so good that if you want to hold a draw, you just try to create a very close position. But somehow it never works out, and it was kind of the case with this game against Fischer. Anyways, rook to h1, Fischer is getting ready to push h4 on the next move and open up files there. Rook to f7, black is ready to defend. By the way, these two guys were actually friendly, and when Fischer was only 15 years old and came to Europe for the first time, Gligoric befriended him, and that friendship lasted for about 40 years. And even many years later, in 1992, Gligoric helped convincing Fischer to come out of retirement and to play his second match against Spassky. So Gligoric was a great guy and a true gentleman. But of course, on the chessboard, they were also opponents and they tried to win. Now, pawn to f3, solidifying this pawn so that on the next move he can play pawn to h4 without losing this one on g4. Now, after an exchange, we've got the Fischer rook controlling the open file. Another classical rule of chess, rooks love open files. Since it's a linear piece, if you can get an open file for the rook, it immediately becomes way more active and powerful than it was before. Rook to h7, black is trying to oppose, but we already know to take is a mistake. That's why instead of trading, Fischer plays rook to h1, the other rook. And now this increases the pressure to this rook, and you can also clearly see how having the space advantage allows you to maneuver your pieces way easier. Because in the ideal world, black would love to do something similar. He would love to bring this rook somewhere closer and support this other one, or at least to put it here. But you see, like, there are many problems for black, right? If he tries playing like this and protecting the rook that way, first off, the bishop stands in the way. Secondly, the white bishop controls that square, right? So that clearly doesn't work, right? That is why having more space allows you to just maneuver way easier. After the exchange on h4, now we've got this rook totally controlling the h-file, another positional accomplishment of Fischer. Pawn to g5 by black. Black is still trying to lock the position. And how would you play now? Where would you move this rook? What do you think? That's now, I think, quite clear difference between beginners and advanced players. Beginners prioritize safety because they don't want to blunder, which is understandable. But nevertheless, because they prioritize safety, they often play something like this, which is not a bad move. Of course, much better than blundering a rook, right? But nevertheless, strong players tend to come forward, right? Because when you come forward, your piece becomes active and it also starts putting pressure onto your opponent. And this is what you want, right? This is how you win games. And Fischer played rook to h6. And notice a big difference. If the rook came here, now it would be black to play, and black would play something like this, and then bring the knight to one of these two squares, and he could probably hold a draw, right? His position is extremely solid. Instead, Fischer played rook to h6 because the next principle, move your pieces forward. And from h6, the rook controls this square, preventing the knight from coming here, and also is putting some pressure to this pawn. Yes, the pawn right now is guarded by the queen, but on the next move, maybe white will keep jumping with the knight forward and will keep increasing the pressure. Now black played king to g7, trying to solidify the pawn and kick out this rook from h6, maybe play knight to g6. A lot of great intentions that black had here, but do you see what Fischer played here? There is a famous rule by Fischer: tactics flow from a superior position, meaning weak players try to look for a sudden tactical opportunity, while strong players know that you got to build up your position, and once it is dominant, tactical opportunities will naturally arise. And Fischer here played rook takes f6, an absolutely beautiful move, a double trouble, because now what can black do? He can take the rook either by the king or by the queen. And if the king takes, there's bishop takes g5, and now black would lose the queen once the king moves. And alternatively, if the queen captures, then there's another issue with knight to h5 fork. Which also, by the way, reminds me of the quote from another world champion, Smyslov, who said that while there are so many different tactical motifs, like it usually comes down just to three: check, fork, and pin, right? And this thing kind of illustrates it really well. Either way, black just resigned because, either way he's losing either the queen or just bishop takes g5, knight h5, and black is completely collapsing. If you want to know how to put all these ideas together into one practical system and how to practice it so that you can actually start following them naturally in your own games, then I put together a special bundle called Boost Your Elo to 2000 that includes everything that you need to progress forward and to have a clear blueprint so that you understand what to do to progress forward, even if you have limited time for chess. I'll drop the link down below. And if you want to see how Carlsen challenged the Chess.com's #1 bot, watch this video next.